Good afternoon, and thank you so much for finding time to joining us this afternoon. It is just 2 minutes past 3 p.m. here in Nairobi, East African time. In case you're waking up from other parts of the world, a very good morning to you. And in case it's already evening where you are, then a very good evening to you. And thank you so much for finding time to be with us today. And here are the headlines on what is making headlines this afternoon from across the continent of Africa. We start with Burkina Faso, and authorities have ordered France 24 broadcast off air following an interview with the head of the Al-Qaeda militant group North African Wing, AKIM. The government said that because of that, what France 24 aired, the interview between AKIM's leader, the leader of Al-Qaeda, earlier this month after France killed his predecessor in an air raid. The relationship between Burkina Faso and France has soared since the coup in October last year. Burkina Faso expelled French troops who had unsuccessfully fought the Islamists, inviting Russian mercenaries in their state. Apologize for confusion in that story, but I'll come back and explain just a little bit later. We move on to the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the Codeco militia group on Sunday executed 17 people it had captured in the Jubu territory in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo. The victims were passengers aboard 4 vehicles heading to Mungwalu in Ituri province, UN-sponsored Radio Okapi has reported. They were taken hostage after 3 Codeco members were killed in a clash with a rival militia, the radio added. Among those taken hostage was a pregnant woman, AFP News agency reported. Now, local authorities are yet to comment on the attack. The Codeco, a militia that claims to protect the Lendu farming community in Ituri, is one of the myriad of armed groups operating in the restive mineral-rich region in the east part of the Democratic Republic of Congo. We go to Ethiopia, and Prime Minister has appointed the spokesperson of the Tigray People's Liberation Front as the head of an interim administration in the Tigray region. The appointment is the latest sign of progress in the peace deal that ended the 2-year war between the government and the TPLF last November. Getachew Reda's appointment was announced in a Twitter message from Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's office on Thursday. The interim regional administration will be in place until elections are held for the region. The peace deal has resulted in the halt of open conflict and a handover of heavy weapons from the Tigrayan forces to the federal government. The government has resumed essential services to the region and has opened aid corridors. It also dropped its designation of the TPLF as a terrorist designation on Wednesday after lawmakers approved the decision by a majority vote. Along with Tigray, other Tigrayan officials had been charged with terrorism under the designation. Ethiopian media reports said those charges were expected to be lifted, though they have yet to be formally discontinued. The TPLF spokesperson was not immediately available for comment. Rights groups have accused all sides of committing war crimes during the 2-year war, including the TPLF, Ethiopia's federal government, and the Eritrean and regional Amhara forces who fought on the side of the government. And we head over to Nigeria. Nigeria's president-elect Bola Tinubu last week dismissed Nigerian media reports of ill health. His campaign saying he had traveled abroad to rest and plan his transition program after a very exhaustive presidential election campaign. Tinubu's health is being closely watched in a country where a former president died in office after a long illness, and the incumbent Muhammadu Buhari routinely traveled abroad for medical checks and in early 2017 spent 3 months on medical leave in Britain for an unspecified ailment. The 70-year-old former governor of commercial hub Lagos had appeared frail during some campaign appearances, his speech often slow and slurred, but he repeatedly brushed aside concerns about his health. Okay. All right, so the latest from Uganda's heir to the throne, that is President Museveni's son, eldest son of, the Ugandan president. Now he says that he will be retiring from the army this year after almost 3 decades of service. Muhoozi Kainerugaba, an army general, made the announcement in a Twitter post. And I'll quote him, "I will be retiring from UPDF this year." He had made a similar announcement on Twitter in March last year when he was the commander of land forces, but the army said it had not officially received Mr. Kainerugaba's retirement request. His latest retirement remarks comes days after he deleted a tweet announcing that he will stand for presidency in 2026. The tweeting general has not hidden his ambition to take over the top job from his 78-year-old father, who has led Uganda since 1986. The Ugandan law does not allow serving soldiers to participate in politics. I apologize for that. And then let's see, we go back to the EAC, and the Democratic Republic of Congo has agreed to retain the East African Community Regional Force EACRF on its territory, even though the actual terms for the mission will be renegotiated. The details emerged after representatives of the East African Community Partner and their chiefs of defense forces met in Bujumbura to review the performance of EACRF 6 months after the decision to deploy. The status of the force agreement so far, which provided for the deployment, has expired. Now, the East African understands that the meeting in Burundi agreed that the East African Community Secretary General Peter Mathuke formally writes to Kinshasa to ask for the renewal of SOFA, which will enable the troop contributing countries to fully deploy. Kenya and Burundi already deployed, and also Uganda as well as South Sudan. A dispatch from the meeting indicated that the South Sudan and Uganda troops are to deploy by March 30th, and I think also South Sudan was making an additional force there of, I think, 300, not 30, but 300 forces there to the DRC. They already made the initial 700, is it 700 or over 700 forces there, but they are meant to be making an additional addition to their forces who are already there in the DRC. Very well, so we move on to Tunisia. And weeks after a violent crackdown on migrants in Tunisia that triggered April's rush to leave by smuggler boats for Italy, many African nationals are still homeless and jobless, and some, they say, they still face racist attacks. Outside the United Nations Refugee Agency in Tunis, dozens of African migrants stood protesting this early today by the temporary camp where they have lived, including with children, since authorities urged landlords to force them from their homes. In announcing the crackdown on February 21st, President Kais Saied said illegal immigration was a criminal conspiracy to change Tunisia's demography, language, and African Union described as racially filled speech. U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Barbara Leaf told Reuters on Thursday last week that Said's comments had unleashed attacks and a wave of racist rhetoric, with rights groups saying hundreds of migrants reported being attacked or being insulted there in Tunisia. Very well, I think you are now up to date, so I will just go over these stories very quickly. You know, this Tunisian story, I don't even want to get into it this afternoon because I think we've talked about it so much. Of course, there are those comments made by President Kais Saied that he even ordered for landlords to force immigrants out of their homes. And so they are facing a lot of attacks there. So I want us to look at quickly the issue of the EAC's force being renewed there in the Democratic Republic of Congo, because I think it's been 6 months now, close there, and I think for the rest of us, we're just wondering what these forces have been doing in Democratic Republic of Congo. How much have they been able to achieve as far as trying to protect lives and bring peace and quell hostilities? You know, we want the tangible, so they met in Bujumbura last week, and the Secretary General of the East African Community was supposed to write to the DRC to ask for the mandate of the East African forces to be renewed. So there was an agreement for these forces to have gone to the Democratic Republic of Congo. There's an agreement that was signed, and it's called the Status of the Force Agreement so far. So they have to renew the status of these forces to still be allowed to be in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And of course, the EAC Secretary General Peter Mathuki, he was updating. There's a meeting that was happening last week, and I saw even him with our president there. So under the operational boundaries, each of the troops has specified sectors, most of which lie in areas vacated by the M23 rebel group, and the EACRF, that is the East African Forces, is banking on Kinshasa's extension of SOFA to help the mission endear itself to the public. Wait, is this the strategy? Because we're going to be here for a very long haul. So the strategy is to wait for when M23 is tired of the space that it's been illegally holding, and then it pushes back, and then the East African Forces gets in there and occupy there, and then starts endearing itself to the locals. This is the strategy. This is the best the East African Forces could have come up with. Anyway, okay. Now, when the troops are first deployed, remember they're asking for their mandate to be renewed, but also part of this is they want to be renewed and also the mandate to be revised, okay? Because when you have these forces, these peace missions, they're being sent somewhere, we talk about those ones in South Sudan, we talk about those ones in the Democratic Republic of Congo, we talk about those ones in maybe Central African Republic, maybe in Mali, and these, countries. So usually, depending on the situation in the country, because each country's situation is different, so the mandate is crafted around the issues that has to do with insecurity or stability, or the unique issues in that country. So they're not always the same, although they have similar, or maybe undertone, but they're not always. The mandate is not usually the same. And so they want, for this one of East African, force, they want this mandate to be renewed, to be looked at, to be revised, because maybe the first mandate they had has not been effective, which I can completely agree, because I was waiting for them to outline for us some of the achievements that this force has achieved so far 6 months later in the Democratic Republic of Congo, but that was not outlined, so obviously I'm bothered. So them wanting to revise this mandate, what is it about the first mandate that was not working, and the strategy that we were given that was not working, or that caused this force not to be effective in its mission, that now has to be revised? I'd like to know that, but let me continue. Perhaps I'll find out here in this story. So when the troops were first deployed, there were complaints from Kinshasa and among the public of being passive. They wanted the force to attack M23 rebels, and when they were going there, I think this is the brief we had, but apparently we were wrong. So they were not supposed to attack the M23, but this is what we are made to believe that the East African forces were going to do. That was different from the MINUSCO, the United Nations mission there, had been doing. So they were supposed to act differently, but that has not been the case. So the DRC has since gone to invite Angolan troops under a bilateral agreement. So I guess now the Angolan troops are supposed to do the job, to attack the M23 directly. But even with that, we've not heard them do that. Now, the defense chiefs meeting in Burundi agreed bilateral arrangements won't affect the work of the EACRF, which is to build confidence for dialogue and as it pursues those who refuse to lay down arms. Okay, fine, I understand the part of building confidence for dialogue, which is, I don't know how they're working on that, but also pursuing those who refuse to lay down arms. That deadline was supposed to be the 30th of this month. We're just about 2 or 3 days away. Today is the 27th, the deadline that was given to the M23. So in the passage of the people who are refusing to lay arms, this was given about a few days ago. It was supposed to, at the beginning of March, towards the end of February, and we are nearing the end of this timeline that was given for these rebels to put down arms and to retreat from the positions that they have illegally occupied in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo, specifically the M23 rebels. So far, we've not heard this EACRF, these forces from the East African community, actively pursuing these rebels who are refusing to lay down arms or even retreating back from this territory that they have occupied illegally. And the EACRF also will discuss with other missions, including the UN Stabilization Mission in Congo, MONUSCO, for a legal framework of cooperation. Now, the DRC has demanded that the military and the political programs of the force run concurrently, meaning that the troops can fight while encouraging dialogue. So that is what DRC has been demanding, or DRC was hoping it will get from the EACRF forces, that even as we talk and engage diplomatically, but in the case that talking and engaging fails, then we're going to use both. That is hard power and soft power. We shall be hitting on you and fighting you and forcing you to retreat, but still also engaging you and maybe asking you to lay down your arms. So this is what DRC had demanded, that the military and political programs run concurrently. But I think the East African community forces, because of the complexity of this war and because of the allegations that have been going around, allegedly, that Rwanda is supporting the M23, and Rwanda being a member of the East African community, I think it has been very tricky for it to effectively deal with this issue. And right from the beginning of this conflict, and when this idea of taking these forces to fight the M23, the East African community forces, I thought this is just a bad idea. It's not going to work because we have interests. These countries, we do have interest, and we are all in the East African community. So perhaps forces from another economic bloc, say which one? We have SADC, which I think, we have COMESA, which the DRC is part of, and we have others. Maybe they would have helped with coming and fighting, because in fighting this M23, but having the East African forces to go fight the M23, when also some of these countries that are forming these forces have been accused before of participating at one point in this conflict, I always thought it was a bad idea, and I always thought it would be counter-effective. So they might be saying that, but they're just using different words, I believe. So now the DRC is demanding, and these demands that the DRC is making, I don't think it will be given. I don't think that the East African community will bow to some of these demands. And I think these are some of the things that really irritate and also frustrate President Tshisekedi, because he's saying you can't create a whole force that will become similar to a force that has existed in the DRC since 2013, MONUSCO, which has more personnel, is more powerful, and has been doing nothing. And then you decide to form another force to come and intervene and also do nothing. So he had hoped that the East African forces were going to maybe act differently and perhaps take the approach that is insisting on military and also political programs. And they're saying these should run concurrently. So now I do understand where the frustration of DRC's President Felix Tshisekedi could be coming from. Now, the EACRF, however, has not fired a shot yet, not even one. They went there with guns fully loaded. And this has really frustrated Kinshasa. Why did you come? Why exactly, Kenya, are you here? Burundi, you've sent troops, you're adding more. Uganda, you've sent your troops first, you're not adding more. But why are you here? If you literally can't take war to the doorsteps of these people who are here, who have refused to adhere to the agreements, who are still occupying territory illegally in the DRC, who are still fighting the government. So why are you here? I think that is what Kinshasa has been asking. And the DRC was still demanding, according to very reliable sources, the DRC was still demanding certainty that the force will actually target rebel groups that refuse to surrender, singling out M23, a group which Kinshasa accuses Rwanda of supporting. But the East Africa Community Force chiefs also pledged to target the FDLR. See, that's where now we're having the, what do you call the cocktail of problems. Now, the East Africa Community Force is saying, fine, we hear you, Tshisekedi, the president, we hear your demands, and we do get your point, and we understand what you're saying. But also, FDLR is also being accused of also fighting. It is also a militia group, and it is fighting, and it is part of the bigger problem that we have to deal with. So if you are going to fight M23, then trust and believe that we also need to fight FDLR. And you know, FDLR is a group that has been accused of being supported by the DR government. You see now where the stalemate is coming from. So now the rest of our countries, and that's why I said this was just a bad idea from the get-go. We should not have formed this force to go into the Democratic Republic of Congo, okay? Because of other interests that now, and the war and the proxy war, and you know, Rwanda, Uganda, DRC and Burundi, they've always had some existing problems between them. You know, some, you know, Rwanda and Uganda, some supremacy wars, and they've participated in another conflict in the DRC. Like, they have their history there. So countries like Kenya, Tanzania, South Sudan, maybe could have been left out of it, you know, because now, if these are the demands that Tshisekedi is making, then you're being drawn into a proxy war that necessarily we could have stayed out of. You know, if he's saying, now I want you to fire shots, and I want you to engage in this manner. But now the East African force will look like they're speaking for President Paul Kagame of Rwanda, because now they're saying, when we are fighting M23, we also want to fight FDLR. See now what kind of a quagmire this is going to create, because Tshisekedi wants this East African force to only operate within what he feels is right. All right, how he feels is right, and the people he feels is a problem for his country, which is M23. And M23 is saying, no, the reason why we're even fighting is because of this FDLR, who is being used to butcher our people, to cause problems to the local community there that is affiliated to Rwanda. So that is the problem we are having. In fact, they're at the beginning of this problem. So you can't keep shielding them, but you want for us to be fought. So in this regard, these forces, no wonder they've not been doing much there, because if this has been the demand, then it is an impossibility, because you also want to act in a way that will not cause havoc in the East African community. You know, we still need to have this community intact after this chaos is over. Nobody knows when this conflict in the DRC will be solved, but we still need this East African community to hold together. So these are some of the things that even now is threatening the existence of this African community, if these are the demands that President Tshisekedi is making. And if these forces refuses to agree with that, then now, you know, these forces represent the interest of the sending countries. You know, our Kenyan forces there represent the interest of Kenya, all right, and its attitude towards this conflict. So are other forces from these other different countries. So if the collective agreement between these forces is, if you're fighting M23, then we're fighting FDLR, and if you can't fight both of them and others, then you're not fighting anybody at all. And Tshisekedi is sitting there thinking, and what? And why are you here? You know, why are you here? So that has been the quagmire. That has been the stalemate that now we see has been, you know, the East African Community Force has to deal with and contend with there in the DRC. So they agreed to pursue the FDLR and all other armed groups. That is the East African Community Forces. Then they said, politics aside, as we're here to fight all the rebels, and FDLR is a rebel. So what they agreed to do is pursue the FDLR and all other armed groups, including the foreign ones and the local one, and share information on existing and new threat. Okay? Now, in the absence of SOFA, I've explained to you what this SOFA is. I think what is the terms and conditions of operation, the status of forces agreement that these countries, the East Africa community, entered to allow their forces to go there. The mandate is ending, and now they are requesting for Kinshasa to allow them to stay. I don't know if President Tshisekedi will be interested in this. Now, in the absence of this SOFA, this agreement, Kinshasa is expected to maintain a status quo at least until April, which is a few days away. The EACRF plans its second phase, will also launch long-term programs including disarmament. Are they now going to start launch? Okay, it's when they're thinking to do that. So what have they been doing for the last 6 months? Okay, it's when they're thinking to launch a long-term program including disarmament, demobilization of militias, and community recovery, including return of refugees and IDPs. Okay, however, troop contributing countries will have the task of mobilizing for funds to run some of the programs. And I'm sure a lot of these countries have found an opportunity to ask to walk around with the begging bowl outside, the international sphere, and so that they're able to support their troops. So this is some wonderful news for them, and even to use their own money in support of that. And of course, some of it they'll say they'll use it to support the soldiers, but it will go to corruption, and unfortunately. And so this is quite something. Now, I wonder if this is the plan the East African Community Forces have. If at all some of the things that they are planning to do are in tandem with what the government of the DRC is agreeing that they should do, right? Because this mission cannot be successful if it does not have the goodwill of the government in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So while they plan to demobilize the militias, and in their mind they're saying even the FDLR must be mobilized, must be disarmed, first of all. So they plan to disarm these militias. That includes M23, that includes FDLR and other smaller militias. And then demobilization of the militias and community recovery, including return of refugees and IDPs. Maybe these refugees and IDPs are people, maybe President Felix Tshisekedi is not keen on having them integrated back to the community. So that is the plan the EAC forces have. I wonder if it's in harmony with what the plan the government of Democratic Republic of Congo has, because I sense a conflict of I sense some conflict here. There are a few things there that I don't know if they have the blessings of the Congolese government. Now, North Kivu, where the EACRF has been based, has been calm, but the DRC was not resting easy after violence erupted near Kinshasa. And I told you there has been some killings that have happened, and there is some locals who are also fighting, and some things that are happening. So anyway, it's not clear while they seek to renew this mandate, it's not very clear what they've been able to achieve. This East African Community Regional Force, EACRF, but they're seeking to renew their mandate. I don't know under what grounds. And now you see it's when, after 6 months, is when they have a plan. And this plan looks like it's going to take a long time. And you know what happens when you overstay? You create more problems. That is what created more problems for France in countries like Mali and Burkina Faso. You must know when to exit. So when you're setting out programs like this with an intention to, because this will not take 6 months, or another 1 year. What I'm seeing here being laid down by the East African force is something that is expected to take time, all right? So they're not even putting a timeline over when this is supposed to happen, because these are things that take time. Soft power sometimes, as much as it is the best way of doing things outside of aggression and physical attacks, the other disadvantage of it is that it takes time, because it is right now that these forces in the East African community, now wants to endear themselves to the people. You tell me how long that will take. You can't put a timeline on that. 1 year later, they'll be saying, no. We are still endearing ourselves to the people. Show us some tangible progress. I know we've still been endearing ourselves to the people because there's no way you can measure how much progress is being made in this kind of a strategy and this kind of diplomatic approach. So that usually is the upside, or the downside of this kind of soft power diplomacy, or this kind of an approach. As much as it's better compared to the physical aggression or what President perhaps Tshisekedi is asking for. But in this, you can't really measure. There's no tangibility to it. Okay, so that is the problem. So they're saying they need time to endear themselves. Remember when these forces was being put together to go to the DRC, there were even protests before even the forces arrived. There were protests there, and that is because there are countries that were planning to have their forces included in this mission that the people of the DRC were not happy about. They're saying, you can't bring us Uganda here. And yet Uganda at some point has been a problem. Matter of fact, M23 political office is in Uganda, right? Political headquarters is in Uganda. The armed wing, I think, is the one in Rwanda. Yeah. So Uganda should not even be in the DRC trying to send its troop to bring peace. Burundi as well has some stakes in there. So these three countries, I've said here numerous times, should not have been involved in this mission. But hey, they're there, except for Rwandan, forces. So now, it will take so much. Because of that, it created some level of discomfort and distrust from the people. And for you to win the hearts of the people and for them to cooperate with you, then you must have some level of trust, and you must create some level of confidence with them. So I think that has been hard for these forces to do. And before they start doing whatever it is that they want to do, before they start pursuing those who are laid down, those who are refusing to lay down their arms, and before they start building confidence for dialogue, they're saying they have to first endear themselves to the people. I don't know what, this is just a joke. These troops went to the DRC without a strategy. That is now showing up very well. The EACRF went to DRC without a proper planning, without a proper mandate. Yeah, that is the word. Without a proper mandate. You can't tell us 6 months later. You can show us what is it that you've been trying to do. What is it that you've done in the DRC? And what have you been trying to do? Your mandate was not very clear. You're not very clear on that. Your strategy, I don't know what strategy you're using, but clearly you have nothing to show for it. And now you are asking for the DRC government to renew your mandate and have this mandate, to have the mission renewed and the mandate revised. Okay, the revision of the mandate is great, but even with this revision of the mandate and some of the things that you're saying you want to do now, I think it's quite vague. And I don't know how this will help us in achieving peace as quickly as it is needed in the DRC. Because what I see here is a plan for these forces to stay there. 10 years later, we'll still be talking about the East African Community Forces still in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Because some of the things that they have outlined they want to be doing there, it does not seem to be a short-term thing. This is something that is meant to take time. So I don't know how this will work, and I don't know if President Tshisekedi will be interested in renewing your mandate, because some of the things that he had hoped and wanted for you to do, you refused to do. He wanted you to take a military and a political approach so that you can fight and also engage in dialogue. But, the ERC, as you have come out, and I think the East African Community Forces on this one, I think I support their stand on this. that we can't just fight the M23, we also have to find the FDLR, because they're all rebel groups and they're all are being accused of committing these atrocities. So if you're going for one, we're going for each and every one of them that is present here. So I think that is a stalemate, and now I know why progress has not been going on there in the these forces that were sent there, the East African Community Forces. So if you're not able to meet the mandate there, because perhaps you're not getting the support from the government, because the government of DRC has been accused of supporting this FDLR. So that means, to some extent, either it has to agree that that is the case and say, okay, fine, now maybe we'll stop, or maybe whatever. But if this matter is not really addressed, and President Tshisekedi is not interested in even having this as part of the talk on the table, then there you go. There's no moving forward. And so now this mission is already facing headwinds. I think it did from the start. But now there's no moving forward, and there's no execution of the mandate as efficiently as you probably could have, if at all you had that kind of support that you need, because I think it's important for the cooperation and support from the Democratic Republic of Congo's government. But if you're reading from different scripts, and if President Tshisekedi feels this should be the goal, and the EAC feels this is the goal and this is how we're approaching it, and you're not together on the same page, then that is a bigger problem. That is a problem. All right? And maybe if it's not possible, just get your staff back home. You don't want to keep funding something that at the end of the day, we're just wasting money. MONUSCO can continue doing that. It has been doing that for a long time. They spent so much. It is one of the most expensive missions that UN has sponsored, by the way, this year, United Nations Stabilization Mission in Congo, one of the most expensive in the world. So UN, has money; it can sponsor that. Us, we have to scrape. We have schools to build. We have hungry citizens to feed. If we sacrificing that money to support our forces to go there, then we need results, period. And if that is not forthcoming, then we need to retreat back and rethink and re-strategize and see if it's even worth it for us to be there. Sometimes it's good to be a realist. That's how you survive in this anarchical world. The world is full of anarchy. So sometimes you just have to be just a little bit selfish and think about your country and what really is of its best interest. Okay? And that's how realists think. All right. I want to thank you so much. I'll see you again here tomorrow, God willing. Thank you for your time. Take care. And my name is Miriam Guto. Bye-bye.